Alrighty, Michelle Brock, welcome to the Hey Sunshine podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am super thrilled you're here. And so you're in New York right now for anyone who's like, I need context for this conversation. Yeah. And it's
Yes,
about 6 o'clock in the evening.
it is.
Yeah.
And, it's that time of year where it's dark super early.
Oh God.
So,
Yeah.
yes. But New York City is an exciting place. I'm grateful to live here. I find it inspiring
Yeah.
every single day. So,
I listened to a podcast where you said anyone who lives in New York, it's like you must have had a past life in New York before because no way could you handle this level of intensity. So
it
crazy.
is. It is intense. It's a lot of people living on top of each other, which I think is true for a lot of cities, but it's also a little bit of a microcosm of the world. It's so diverse and people that come from everywhere. I love it. I love it. I didn't
Yeah.
grow up here, but I moved here in my early 20s and I've been hooked ever
Here ever
since.
since.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Michelle, I love to start the podcast with a question about magic. So what is magic to you?
It's such an amazing question, because I don't think that we think about magic in this kind of context. Like, what is it? But to me, magic is the discovery that there is more to life than what meets the eye. And that change in perception can happen in a million different ways, right? It can happen in a fleeting moment where, like, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But I'm a little bit more of a kind of practical magic or a magic of the ordinary kind of like person, where we can find magic in our daily life just by looking to see that there might be layers of understanding to what we see, know, feel, and experience that we can't kind of comprehend. To me, that's magic. And once you know that, then everything is magic, right?
I love that.
We're permeated with it. So
Yeah. Even
yeah,
like
thank you.
human beings as in its entirety, we are magic. Like how can we like be this flesh and organs in a skin suit, literally like on a planet, just rotating? I'm like, that is magic. I know there's science behind it, but there's magic.
Totally. And I love that, the skin suit, because that's
Yeah.
totally how I see it too. You're like, well, we're here right now. And then, but the idea that there is just this vast universe of knowledge and experience that and our human brains can only perceive a certain amount of it. So the fact that when we tap into that, to me, that's what magic is, to tap into that bigger picture. So,
and we're going to tap into a little bit of past life magic today, which I'm super excited about. So I thought for anyone who's listening to the podcast and is a little bit like, I've heard about past lives, I don't really know, maybe like let's start from like ground zero. What is past lives and what is past life regression?
great. Yes. Okay. So past lives relies on the concept of reincarnation, which is the idea that we've lived before in a different body, and after death, that we come back in a different form with our consciousness, or what I like to call our soul. We don't always have to call it our soul or spirit, but that piece of us that does survive death comes with us into a new body. Cool. So the idea that you have a past life means that your consciousness experienced a different form before and lived a human life. Although it's true that we can have animal lives and other, existences, so cool. I think that we can kind of blow the lid off of what we can consider like existence. But the idea of past lives does rely on the concept of reincarnation, right? So that we come back in a different form. And passive regression is the process of recalling memories from your past life. So the idea that you've lived before in a different form and you had a whole life with a family and a job and feelings and experiences, the idea that you can in your next life tap into that experience by way of actual memories is what I do. I help people uncover memories from their past lives through a technique called past life regression.
Oh my God, there is so much juice. There is so much juice in here. I'm like, I've got so many questions, but I suppose I want to start off with some really like tangible, kind of like evidence and story, which I think is what helps us learn the most. So what were some experiences or past lives that you've had, and what were the like current life signs or quote unquote symptoms you're experiencing that made you want to tap into this world?
I love this question because it is so kind of practical and personal. Um, I don't have a lot of like profound past lives, but if you spend a lot of time with me or like are in my apartment, the way it's decorated in my art, you can kind of get a clue as to who I was in a past life. I mean, I think that we're all kind of drawn to different time periods and things that speak to us, right? Like things that represent kind of cultures and time periods, either visually through art. But kind of growing up, I didn't really know anything about reincarnation because my parents were really religious and didn't believe in past lives. So this was not a concept that was introduced to me. But there were certain things that I was kind of always drawn to. So, like I said, I don't have really profound past lives, but different time periods and places and things that I was drawn to kind of make sense. If you know someone, you're like, oh, okay, of course they love to collect certain tchotchkes from Egypt, so of course they had a past life in Egypt, right? That's like one of those chicken or egg things, right? Like do you think you had a past life because you're drawn to that place, or are you drawn to that place because you had a past life? I don't really care, right? But to me, the clues always existed in that I never really felt, when I looked in the mirror, that what I saw was actually me. And I know that sounds totally strange. I used to actually, when I was a child, I'd look in the mirror and be like, who's that? Like, is that me? And so that idea of like a sense of self and identity was really kind of my foray into past lives. Like, who I am is all of that and nothing. And like when I look in the mirror and I'm like, am I this like blonde American woman? Like, no.
No, so much more
I
than
never identified with that. And even as like a young child, 3-4 years old. So when you ask about the clues, I would say that was my clue, that like I never really kind of like looked in the mirror and was like, oh yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, who's that?
That's so
that
cool.
makes sense. And I think
definitely makes sense. Yeah.
I think that's a common experience. I think a lot of people are like, who am
Is that
I?
me?
Right.
Well, and I do think as well, like a lot of children have those, those early moments where they're like, oh, mommy, I was, in Egypt, or, I think there was that one where it was Princess Diana reincarnated as this little boy. And it's just, it's mind blowing stuff. And, kids, they're so tapped into their spirituality and they're so tapped into their intuition. So them like saying that stuff, it's like they're obviously reading it from somewhere. Like they don't just make this stuff up. So
I think that most children talk about past lives, but depending on the culture, I mean, we kind of dismiss it like, oh, you're crazy. Like people talk about when they used to be big, or like when I lived before. And I remember one time I asked my daughter, who's now in college, but when she was 3, I was like, do you remember when you used to be big? And she got super serious for a moment. Like, and she's a serious child anyways, and very artistic and creative, but she was like, yes, like, and seemed relieved that I was almost asking her the question, like it was something that she kind of wanted to unload. And she told this story that was so dark. I was like,
where did this come from?
And she was coloring a picture of Cinderella, I think, as she was telling this story. And I was like, wait, what? So and I just don't think in this culture, we really treat like these memories that children talk about we don't take them seriously, right? But I think that it's actually really, really common.
But I think it's just a big fear thing, I think, for parents. It's like, oh, don't talk about that. Like, I don't want it to be, quote unquote, I don't want to be the weird family, or like, I don't want us to be shunned. So it's like all this, like, again, that's probably past life or conditioned beliefs and patterns that are playing out. And I know when when I have kids, I'm like, I just want to like nurture your spiritual growth and like your intuition and just kind of like let you develop with it, because it's something that I have been on a journey with, trying to find myself and reconnect back into that. And I think that's what
Yeah.
really sparked my past life stuff. Is I had a really big fear around sharing my voice, which is so ironic because I have a podcast now. But
Yeah.
I would share something and I would literally have full body like panic attacks, and like I would be so tight around the neck. And in a few past life regressions, which I've spoke about, I think, on the podcast, but I went back to a day, and it's always something witch related, but I was some sort of psychic or seer, and I was getting full on physical pins and needles in my hands, like in the middle of my hands and my feet. And I saw like the tartan skirt, and moving through that and a lot of layers around other past life fears around sharing my voice, I came to this part where I'm like, what am I in this current life, what am I doing? Like that's no longer needed. It served me in a past life, or it happened in a past life, but it's no longer needed here.
So you were able to have that catharsis and that release. And when you say the tartan skirt, are you connecting that to like Scotland?
I don't know. When I say tartan, it was more like a plaid skirt, where it's like long and kind of like the sort of like brownie and navy sort of tones. And I
That
just
part of the world
yeah.
was pretty renowned for their witch trials.
There you go.
You know?
Yeah.
But I think that that's actually really common. A lot of us who were witches in past lives, I mean, you can burn us, we're not going to stop being witches.
No.
We're back, we're still here, and reclaiming your voice about these kind of esoteric or spiritual topics, I think is a really beautiful way to kind of bring your own kind of karma back into balance with yourself, where you're like, you can't burn me now. I'm gonna like,
it's like you could
share
cancel
the
me, but you
message
can't
with the
burn
world. Yes, you could cancel me. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that that's a really amazing, kind of practical way to use your past life to find your purpose in this one, right?
100%. And I do feel like sharing my voice is a big part of my purpose. So I'm so glad that I could kind of move past that. And another funny thing, Michelle, is like me and my sister are obsessed with anything period drama related. Like we watch anything period drama, Outlander, anything like that, and we feel so at home, and we're like, oh my God. I'm like, this is me. So I think Scotland would definitely have something to do with it.
I was going to say that is my wheelhouse too. Anything that was set in the past.
Oh my
It's
God.
like books, movies, like my boyfriend teases me about it. He's like, yep, you and your like 17th century thing. I'm like, yep, it resonates. Right. And I think that most people are drawn to movies, books, places that they were in a past life. So the fact that you said Outlander, that's one of mine too. And
it's so good.
I'm Scottish in this life. I mean, I'm American, but like my heritage is Scottish, but I'm kind of like, they didn't like witches in Scotland so much.
Oh, it's honestly the best. I think we're up to like season 6 now. And we watched it like twice through. Like we're just full blown obsessed. Anyway,
I love it.
I digress.
You digress.
So I want to talk about like the soul's journey, because I think before we're talking about, this meat suit, this physical body, and it's like, it's not just this physical body, and you looking in, the mirror as a child and being like, I know there's so much more to this. So can you explain a little bit like about our soul's journey and how karma and karmic contracts plays a role in reincarnation?
Awesome. Yeah. Such a loaded question, but a really, really amazing one. Like what I've come to learn, and everything I talk about or teach comes either from my own direct experience or from the experiences that I've seen my clients have. I do like to read a lot, but I'm not a religious scholar. A lot of people are like, oh, are you drawing this from like Buddhist or Hindu or Christian or, no. So what I've learned from watching my clients have past life memories for the past 16 years is that we reincarnate in order to learn. And we're beings who learn by doing, right? So we have to experience something directly in order to kind of get the lesson from it. So we reincarnate as all things. I mean, male, female, black, white, rich, poor. We live it all in order to kind of get this variety of experiences to figure out ultimately what we're here to learn, which is lessons about love.
Yeah.
Right. And not to oversimplify it, but like that's kind of what we're here to learn, like lessons about love. So the way that karma kind of would tie into that is when we didn't quite step up to the lesson, or we didn't quite get it right, which we're supposed to do because we're in kindergarten or in fourth grade. We're not in grad school, right? Otherwise, like people are like, oh, well, can I just be done reincarnating? I'm like, well, it's a school, right? We kind of go through different lessons. So looking back at our past lives, one of the things that I encourage my clients to do is to take a compassionate view to themselves as an earlier, younger version of themselves. Like, oh, I killed this person, or I did this. And well, guess what? You've learned since then. You've evolved and grown. So karma is a really kind of personal, almost like impetus for what we're learning and growing and doing, like almost like, I don't know, the test you got a 87 on that you wanted to get a 95 on, right?
Yeah.
So and it's very, very personal. It's not really necessarily about punishment. I have not found that to be true at all. In fact, I think that's a complete and total myth. And I think a lot of people have kind of used that idea to kind of weaponize, like, oh, you get what you get, or this is what's coming to you. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes more evolved souls or wiser souls choose more difficult lifetimes because they're capable of that lesson on that level. So it's not really about judgment. I actually don't think that there's room for judgment in any of this at all. We all have these journeys over many lifetimes where we're all doing the same thing. We're souls on a journey looking to become better, more loving beings over many lifetimes. That's my take on it.
No, I love that. And I think it's, when we look at lives that are cut short, I've had friends pass away that were the most epic humans, and they were like, 25, 28. And I think what really helped me is like knowing that their soul's journey, it's a soul's journey. It's not a life journey. So it brings a peace to death for me. That's knowing that their time on this earth, or their mission on this earth is done or complete, and they're going to reincarnate and change and impact so many more lives. And even like infants that die so young, it's like perhaps their karmic debt or thing to repay was actually to come into their parents' lives and impact their parents' lives in such a way. So I know it's hard to grasp. Death is really, it's a really tricky and icky subject, but it's like when we can zoom out and see it as a soul's journey, I think it brings a lot more peace.
I think that what you just said is actually like kind of hits to the crux of, what we're trying to do here with, understanding what life is all about and bringing past lives into it. For me, this is actually how I got into this work, like understanding why bad things happen to good people and why babies die. And some people live to be like 95. Really. And I'm a Libra, and I'm a Libra rising, and I have a lot of Libra placements. So I'm kind of like that fairness and justice thing is kind of stitched into my kind of DNA. But it wasn't really until I understood what reincarnation was and how it worked that made sense to me, that there's this bigger picture that we have to kind of pull the curtains open wider and kind of see like, well, wow, this person had a shorter life, but then they're going to have a longer life. And that we can't just really judge, what's happening on the basis of just, a micro level. Absolutely. I think that is really a beautiful foray into this concept that like losing people that you care about yourself and seeing like, well,
Yeah.
that was a really amazing person. Why were they too,
It's like, why
you
was their
know,
life cut short? And it's like something that people
yeah,
say so often is like, life is so unfair. And I'm like, when you are in the micro, life does look unfair. It's like, why is that person rich? Why is that person homeless? But then it's like when we do, and obviously talking from a very privileged place right now, but when we do zoom out, it's like we can see the bigger picture. And I think that's why
yeah,
past life and regression is so important and can really help us get a bigger understanding of what we're here to do and like what is life actually about. So
yeah.
I kind of want to like move into when I heard this idea, I was like, oh my God, mind blown. So souls reincarnating in groups, which I think plays into that
Hmm.
karmic debt. It's like if you've got a karmic debt, I would imagine that souls need to reincarnate in some sort of groups or some sort of communal sort of things to repay the debt. So can you talk to that idea a little bit, Michelle?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is something that I call like kind of soul families.
Mm,
We have soul mates, and a lot of people get like really fixated on the idea of soulmate, like
yeah.
that there's just one person for us and it's a romantic partner. I haven't found that to be true at all.
Mm,
That we have many different kind of soulmates of different types and different kind of like the way that we show up for each other. Like your mother in this life might have been your sister in a past life, or your husband could have been your son, right?
yeah.
Vice versa. So the idea that we travel in these groups are that we have these individual karmas that we're working out with each other
Mm,
through our interactions, because we can't learn by doing in a vacuum.
mm,
We have to learn by presenting each other with lessons, right? So we can't just kind of go through life alone and expect to
mm.
get all the
Yeah.
lessons that we need,
It's not very
right?
fun.
Not very fun and not very practical either. So we're kind of like, the challenging relationships, the easier relationships, the loving relationships, they're all kind of part of our greater purpose and our design, but that we do tend to have this kind of soul family
Mm,
that we tend to kind of have a collective karma with,
yeah.
as well as an individual karma with. And we kind of move through lifetime after lifetime, and
Mm,
we change forms. Like I said, just because somebody's been your husband in this life doesn't mean they weren't your son in a
yeah.
past life, you know, um, which sounds crazy to some people, but it actually makes a lot of sense when
Makes
you
so
think
much
about
sense.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because love is an energy, and it's not this kind of like, there are many ways to love. And
Mm,
if we're here to learn lessons about love, we have to learn from all sides.
yeah.
So that's my take on the soul family. And I think
Mm,
that I always ask people, I'm like, pinpoint the 10 to 15 people that are closest to you,
hmm.
whether they're in your family or, my best friend, who's been my best friend for 25 years. She's been my mother in more past lives than
So
I
good.
can recall. And it's so funny because she's only a couple years older than me, but she always calls me
Mm.
like, I'm so worried about you. I haven't heard from you, you know,
It's
and
the
it makes
best. Yeah.
sense. Yes. Like,
Mm,
and in this life, we're not blood family, but
yeah.
we're kind of soul family. So
Yeah.
I think that's I think the soulmate aspect of it
Mm,
is a really beautiful part of the past life work, to kind of
yeah.
see that the people in your life, you've known them before, you've loved them before,
Mm,
you reunite in this life in order to build on that love that you've already cultivated,
mm,
in order to expand upon it and
yeah.
teach
It's
each
cool.
other new dimensions. It's a really, really beautiful thing.
And
So
what would be like a either a feeling or a trait or like a signpost of someone who might have been in a past life? Like I know there's the ones that you feel like connection straight away, but also the ones who you're like it's that immediate trigger and you're like, why do I hate you? But I don't even know you.
yes.
Um
I think that what you said was like hits on it exactly. Anytime you have a really extreme reaction to a person that's almost like knee jerk, like, I just don't like this person and I don't know why.
mm,
That's usually like, that's probably like there's some past life stuff at
yeah.
play. Or, oh, I can't stop thinking about this person.
Mm,
and this is tricky too with, I always tell people like soulmates are the most cautionary of tales.
Yeah.
Sometimes like, the most colorful fish is the poison one where you're like, oh, I can't stop thinking about this person. That is usually karma. There's usually a lesson or a challenge. Sometimes the challenge is about love. Sometimes it's about self-love, respect, like leaving the person because you want to respect yourself, which is
that would be massive. Because and this kind of segues into twin flames, which I know is like such a loaded, like, people like, I want to meet my twin flame. And I'm like, I don't think you do.
No,
what
you
like
don't.
that's the rainbow fish that is actually the poisonous fish, I feel. But what's your take on twin flames?
I actually really hate that term.
Me too.
Because I think that it makes people think that there's just like the one. There's no one. There's as many soulmates out there for us as there are choices in life.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not a fixed thing, because I look at our life in this life through the lens of past lives, is that we're constantly growing and evolving. So you can make a choice to kind of be like, yeah, I'm going to choose the same kind of guy and I'm going to be stuck in this, or you can be like, no, I'm going to respect myself. I'm going to get rid of this bad habit, that bad habit. And then you'll attract a new soulmate that will represent that new level of healing and growth. And I don't think there's ever any end to the level of healing and growth that we can kind of attain. But the way that it kind of looks to me is that it's almost like shuffling a deck of cards. You're in a relationship. It's like, okay, this person is definitely supposed to be in my life. It's sticky. It's got like all of those qualities. Like I felt like we met and we knew each other already, and the sex is amazing and I can't live without them. And then when you realize like, wow, this relationship needs to end in order for me to evolve to where I'm going, the card deck shuffles again.
Yeah.
And then there's a soulmate that comes that represents that kind of new level of growth or healing. So the concept of the twin flame, I think, limits people. And I hear people say like, oh, like he's married, but he's my twin flame.
Oh my God. I know.
Yes. Sorry.
And also, like, I've heard a lot of people who are in quite narcissistic and abusive relationships, but staying in it because they're like, oh, here's my twin flame. And I'm like, I don't care who the fuck he is. If he's not treating you well, get out. Or she.
Get out.
I should be either or.
Well, no, because what they're describing is that feeling of like stickiness. And I think that we're drawn to people and situations kind of like moss to a flame.
Yeah.
On purpose, because we're supposed to confront it. Like, oh, there's a lesson here, right? It's like, oh, the guy that is like so hot and you can't like stop texting, right?
Yeah.
Like there's something to learn. So, and that's hard to master, I think, right? Like we're all human. We're trying to like navigate this thing with, that's called life. But actually uncovering the memories connected with past lives with these people can help you navigate those relationships in a more mindful way, because you have the backstory. You're like, oh, he killed me in a past life.
You're like, okay, damn that
Did
bitch,
I date him?
No.
Maybe, right? Yeah. Like, but at the same time, I mean, because it's not, the past life doesn't give you the answer. It gives you more information that you need to know about that connection.
Yeah, the past life doesn't give you the answer, it gives you more information, because I think so many people can go into past life work being like, I need the solution or I need the fix. I'm like, this is it. But it's like, I think it's such a balance.
Me.
Yeah, fix me.
Right.
But it's such a balance, right? Between, obviously going through our current life trauma, which is a lot. And I would say, and I love your thoughts on this, is that something that we want to work through first, our current life trauma, before we address the past life?
I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I see them as connected.
Okay.
And I mean, this obviously depends. I mean, people that have had significant trauma in this life, may want to kind of seek some professional help before they start piling their past lives on top of it. But often the past lives are informing the current life trauma. I don't see the past as, this different arc that's separate from our childhood or anything that we've had in the past. In fact, usually when people do past life regressions with me, themes or subjects from their childhood do show up in the past life, because it's kind of like,
it's all connected.
It's all connected. That's our past. And obviously this is a case by case basis. Some people that have specific abuse or trauma, I'm kind of like, okay, maybe you need to go talk to a therapist first. We don't want to pull up more than you can handle and add on kind of top of that. And I have run into that a couple of times, but most people find that the past lives are a beautiful supplement or complement to what they're already working on in their current life, if that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense. And you touched on something, I don't know where, like it would have been a podcast I listened to of yours. And it's the idea of time as a wheel, not an arrow, which I think is like most of us in our logical mind, we're like, time is linear. Time, it's like, this is past, this is future, this is present. Yeah. Could you explain the time as a wheel concept?
So this was a concept that was introduced to me by one of my Native American teachers. And this is an indigenous people's concept, like pretty much globally, that the way that we perceive time as human beings is based on our perception, that the past, present, and future are all happening concurrently. And it's interesting that the field of quantum physics is actually proving that out, actually mathematically, which is why it's possible to remember a past life that happened in, Paleolithic times as if it were yesterday. Yeah. But that the idea that the past, present, future are all happening concurrently also means that our past lives are affecting us today and holding us back from the future that we would like to create. Yeah. So that's kind of how I approach my work with like kind of my clients, where I'm looking at like, okay, let's go back to like what happened in your past that's holding you back from the future that you would like to have. Yeah. And on an energetic kind of quantum physics level, that ends up being true. We're always creating our own future. And the past is also not necessarily defined. We can go back and understand the past and maybe not necessarily change the narrative of the past, but change the way that we download or perceive that past. And then that puts us on a new trajectory for a new future, if that makes sense.
This is like blowing my mind. And I'm even thinking future, it's like future lives can then impact our present life.
Absolutely.
If time is a wheel.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
And, I do occasionally get clients who will remember a kind of future lifetime, whether it's a future in this life or a future life. And it's always something that has a message about the crossroads where they're at now. Like if you want to have this success, happiness, like whatever, let go of XYZ. Yeah. Right. Like, so, I mean, I don't believe in fate as much as I believe in destiny.
Yeah. That was a question I was going to ask. What, like, talk us through what you think about that. Like, because even you said before, if we make a mistake in this, quote unquote mistake, we kill someone or whatever, we have to come back. But could that have been destiny?
Yeah, I think that there are certain things that are kind of meant to happen. Like we can't control the weather. We can't control, we can't control what other people do, but we can control how we respond to different events in our life. Right. So, and to me, destiny kind of implies that there's a little bit of like a higher calling to it too. Like I'm going to go through this challenge in order to kind of find my destiny. And this is true in all of our mythology as a human species in every corner of every globe, right? Like where the hero's journey and the hero took the journey and then overcame this challenge and then found their destiny. Going back to what we were talking about magic, I do believe that that's true. I believe that we're constantly in control of our own destiny, and we're always on our own kind of like hero's journey. So we can kind of sit here and just kind of make the same mistakes over and over again, or just kind of be like, I just want to chill in this lifetime.
Yeah. Totally okay.
Or can I just not? Or we take the courageous path, or the path that involves overcoming some of our perceived limitations, like you were saying about starting this podcast and having fears of speaking out, right? I remember when I started doing Past Life Regression full time, I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Crazy? Like, how am I ever gonna like kind of do this? But it to me felt like a little bit more of a destiny thing. Like, this is what I'm being called to do. And I could have said no. You could have said no, right? We always have our choice. We're empowered to our own lives, which is what's amazing.
Do you think destiny would keep knocking on your door? If you never picked up Past Life Regression, do you think it would keep knocking on your door until you answered it?
I mean, based on the story of my own life and the fact that I was in my early 30s when I finally answered the call to do Past Life Regression, it did keep knocking louder and louder till it was like, you will not ignore me anymore. But I do think that that's true. I think that we're constantly being groomed for our own future, but we can be open to it and aware of it, or we can be asleep to it. But if we're asleep to it in the next life, we're going to have to start over again and do it all again. So I'm always telling people like, you may as well like answer the call, because you're going to be back to square one. It'll be 100 years from now, and you'll be still doing the same shit over and over again.
Oh, man. So this is like a very logical question, but say when we die and, we have time just as spent as a soul before we reincarnate, where do you think we go? And how long do you think we're away for? Or it would obviously just depend based on the soul?
It's interesting. I have actually tracked, and this is kind of strange, but I've worked with like thousands of people. I have found that as history has progressed, the time that people spend between lives has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. It used to be like, so for example, like if you had a past life in like 1200, you might be on the other side till 1400. Whoa. But if you were in 1902, you're coming back in 1919. You know what I mean? Like that there's maybe more opportunities for learning and growth, and things are moving faster. We have this kind of global community. I think more of us want to be here.
Yeah.
For the opportunities to kind of learn and grow, and what we can contribute also to the raising the consciousness of the planet. There's all of that kind of going on. Where I think we go is interesting, because I don't think we go to another place. I think we maybe go to another dimension.
Yeah.
I actually see the spirit world as being kind of around us at all times. And this is based on, I'm also a psychic medium, and I had a lot of strange experiences as a child where like people who had passed, I'm like, everybody's crying at the funeral, and I'm like, they're right there.
It's like, what are you guys doing?
I can see them, I can hear them. But I do believe, and again, quantum physics, multiple dimensions of consciousness all happening concurrently. I just think that when we do pass, we pass to a different level of consciousness, but that happens around us, which is why we can tap into that and communicate with spirit and have these experiences, because it's not like heaven is this place that's like away. I don't necessarily believe in the kind of classic religious idea of like heaven and hell. After the years I've been working with people with past life regression.
Mm.
And in fact, I've had a few clients say that, like, if there is hell, we're like living it.
Yeah, exactly.
In human form.
Yeah, if 2020 wasn't hell, I don't know what.
We're like in a human body in 2020. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
that's so fascinating.
that's kind of my take on it, that I do believe that there are multiple levels of consciousness, and obviously too, so much more to our reality than what meets the eye, going back to my magic kind of thing, like where it's like, how many rungs of the ladder are there of our consciousness? We don't really know. So
that's so cool.
That's my take on it.
And where do you think we're going as humanity? Because I kind of think, like, are we having more and more past lives, more and more lives, and we're coming back quicker because we're moving to this new state of humanity? Like, what's your sort of like take on where we're heading?
I do believe that, and I have a hard time like separating whether I hope we're doing that.
Yeah, I know.
From whether like, can we just be a little bit more awake to it? But I do actually believe that many of us who are evolved souls, who, you know, are healers, who like yourself have been witches in a past life or persecuted for speaking your truth, are back reincarnated, and like, I'm going to do a podcast.
Yes.
Because
let's spread the light.
Spread this word, spread the light, right? Yeah. I see that. And it's amazing, and it's inspiring.
Yeah.
And almost like I said, like, as a individual, we evolve and grow over many lifetimes, but we also do that collectively as a humanity, as a collective consciousness. Yeah. So, you know, some people who choose to reincarnate, you know, it's like, thank you for being here and bringing your message of love and hope, because we need it. But I have to believe that this is going somewhere, right? That this is like a trajectory that we're all choosing to help each other beyond, because we can't get there alone. We have to get there together. Right?
Yes. Yeah. So, which is literally like what the past, you know, I think the past, you know, however many years, 3 years, it's felt very divisive, but I think it needed to get to that point where it was so, you know, us against them, to then get to a point where it's like, no, we're like, that's not the answer. Like, the answer isn't swinging the pendulum to the other way. It's like, the answer is in community, it's in collaboration, it's in like connecting with one another, and realizing like we're not separate, we are one. As you know, as cliche as that sounds, it's like that's the truth of it, you know.
I totally agree. And here in the United States, we've been dealing with that on such a, and I think all over the world also too, but like our reality here in the US, like these divisive figures. People ask me all the time, like, oh, what's the point of these divisive figures? Well, they exist for a reason. They exist to get us to think and reunite and decide to kind of come together after these periods of divisiveness, like that, to find our commonalities and to find our common humanity, I think is the challenge, right? Like, we're going to reincarnate. You're going to be born to this mother in this time, and your job is to figure out that we're all the same. We're like, all on the same journey.
And it's right? like if each reincarnation was easy, we wouldn't learn. And it's like, if life was easy and we didn't have, you know, the polarity of the dark and the light, like, we wouldn't learn as well. So it's like, as much as it's shit having COVID and all that sort of stuff, but it's so essential in our collective journey.
Well said. I think that all of these dark figures are just as important as the figures that show us the light, because ultimately they lead to our learning and our growth and coming together as one humanity.
As one. Yeah.
Not that it's easy to go through.
I know, we make it sound so simple. It's like, we've clocked world issues, we're done.
It's for your learning and growth. You're just reincarnated for you know, go for it. Right.
Well, I could talk to you for hours, but I'm conscious of the time. So I want to finish on a closing question about what has been the most mind-blowing past life story and healing that you've seen.
That is such a difficult question, because I have a million stories, but
that'd all be mind-blowing. Or
You know,
your favorite one?
my favorite story is this man that I worked with. This is maybe like 10 years ago. And this is kind of like playing to the idea of identity, which is become the crux of my work, right? Like and actually I wrote a book that's coming out next year about this called Who Do You Think You Are?
Cool.
Like you're not a woman or white, black, rich, poor, that. But I worked with this man years ago, and I don't even remember who sent him to me, but he kind of came in. He's like, I'm this big Wall Street guy. I'm here to like explore my past lives. And he was kind of like a master of his universe, right? Very successful guy, white guy. And in his past life, he remembered being a woman of color in what seemed to be kind of sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
And he was not dressed from the waist up. And he kept like looking down and he was like, I'm a woman.
That's so good.
And I'm like, yeah, like, and that moment, and not only was he a woman, but he was a woman of color. He was this regal African woman. And he goes, I have one kid on one hip and one kid on the other hip and another kid running around. And he goes, but yet I'm working in the fields. And he was just like, mind blown. And afterwards, he was like, I have so much respect for women.
Yeah. Wow.
And so much respect for, women in these tribal cultures where we would like, like juggling. And this was a totally different experience than his current life as being like a white man who went to an Ivy League
Wall
school
Street.
and worked on Wall Street, where he was just like, and I think, I stayed in touch with him for a while afterwards, but he said, he goes, totally changed the way that I look at my wife and all of the women in my life and my hiring practices, like where someone comes in and you're like, oh, wow, you're a woman of color who was raised by a single mom. You must be a badass.
Yeah, exactly. You got the job.
You got the job because I already know. And that to me is probably one of the most badass examples where I've seen where it's kind of like who he thought he was completely shattered. He's like, I found my own inner woman of color who's a strong woman who knows how to kind of like, bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan, right? That kind of thing. That's one of my favorite stories because that transformation was so immediate and so complete. But I've seen 1,000,001 people kind of like see themselves as a different gender, ethnicity, race, circumstance, and just completely change the way that they look at who they are and the life they're living right now. And once that opens that curtain, then the sky's the limit. Like who are we?
And also changing the way that we see other people, because it sounds like from that story, it comes back to that idea of like, I'm not just me. I'm like all the people that I was in the past and all the people that I'm going to be in the future. And, it's going to be all these different genders and races and living in all these different areas of the world, or it could be an animal. That's the idea of oneness. That comes back to that thing of like, we are everything.
I always tell people that if everyone everywhere really understood how reincarnation works, there would be equality. There would be world peace because we would understand that you are another me. In a very like kind of literal way, right? Like we can think that as a concept, but kind of look and be like, well, yeah, I've been XYZ, right? So I actually think that if everyone everywhere could discover their past lives, that we could actually make real change to our society in a really rapid and quick way.
So
like,
good.
Everyone needs to do a past life regression. Let's just do it. Right.
Well, where can people find your work and like how can they, I'm not sure if you're doing one-on-ones or how can they get your books? How can they get to you?
How can they get to? So I am doing one-on-one sessions. You can book that through my website, which is Michelle with 2Ls -brock.com. I'm on Instagram as Past Life Michelle. And my book comes out next year. So yeah, you can either sign up for my email newsletter or follow me on Instagram, but I'm super excited to share the book. I had a ton of fun writing it. Like I said, it's about exploring identity and all that. But yeah, I'm on YouTube also too, Michelle Brock. You can find me if you just Google me. So
is that your first book?
It will be my first book.
Oh my God,
yes.
That's amazing. So good. Congratulations.
I'm so excited. Thank you. Yes. Yes.
Well, it has been like, honestly, like podcast career highlight talking to you. I've just had a ball. Yeah, I'm so lit up, and I know anyone who listens is just going to be so enthralled by this conversation. So thank you, Michelle. I'm so grateful.
Thank you. And thank you for your thoughtful questions and for bringing your light and all of that to the world. I appreciate it.
Oh, so good. Well, everyone who's listening, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.